Welcome to the Immigration Therapist Podcast, a podcast for therapists that want to learn more about immigration evaluations and attorneys that want to learn more about the psychological and emotional aspects of these evaluations. So on today's episode, we are going to talk about HIPAA compliance and ethics when it comes to immigration evaluations. So, as I've talked about in another episode, immigration clients are different than regular therapy clients. But just because there is a difference there, it doesn't mean that the laws, regulations, and ethics change. So, I'm a LCSW, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And with my career and with my license and with other licenses, like, for example, mental health counselors or marriage and family therapists, every profession, every license has a set amount of rules and ethics that we have to follow. There's a board that we all have to that we owe that we owe our licenses to, and we have to comply by their rules. So I wanted to talk about how to abide by those rules and comply when it comes to immigration evaluations. So here's what I have to say. When it comes to HIPAA compliance and ethics, there's no change. Whether they're immigration clients or regular therapy clients, it's the same. So yes, the business aspect is different when dealing with immigration clients, but when it comes to ethics, no, it's the same. So for example, what do I mean by that? All the paperwork that's required to fill out, therapy clients are required to fill out for regular therapy, also need to be filled out by immigration clients. I highly encourage, I know, because I'm in Florida, and I know there are people listening to this that are in other states. I highly encourage you to speak to your board and your liability insurance attorney. But, we have to play it safe. And again, just because we're doing an immigration evaluation for clients, it doesn't mean that they're not clients in a therapeutic scenario. So for example, all the paperwork that a regular client would sign, these clients would also sign. And actually, I would even argue they'd have to sign even more forms. So for example, they have to sign release of information. They have to sign consent for treatment, practice policy, all those forms. If you're a therapist and you use an EHR, your EHR should have those forms already. Like, for example, I use Simple Practice, and Simple Practice already has all those forms in place. I just added and created a few extra forms that client needs to sign, just because, again, I just want to cover all my bases. So, again, these immigration clients, they do fill out regular forms. And I wanted to speak about mandated reporting as well. Again, we have ethics, we have a board that we have to abide to, and we are mandated reporters no matter what. Doesn't matter if we're doing regular therapy or, immigration evaluations. We are mandated reporters. And a lot of these evaluations will entail abuse, trauma, abuse and neglect, obviously, because we're dealing with trauma. And in some scenarios, you'll be required to report, to make a call. I've had to make a call. I've had to call DCF a couple of times because of abuse to minors and vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, the immigration attorney wasn't too happy about that. But again, when it comes to our license, we have a board that we respond to, and those are the people that we respond to when it comes to, again, our license. So if there's a case of abuse or neglect to a vulnerable population, again, children, minors, or the elderly, or someone who's incapacitated cognitively, we have to report. But I'll say that more so than not, a lot of these evaluations, a lot of the abuse, neglect actually happen in their country of origin. Maybe in VAWA evaluations, you will abuse will come up, abuse and neglect of a minor will come up, maybe in those. But and of course, again, as mandated reporters, we need to call. We need to make a call. But I'd say that for most of the evaluations, the abuse and neglect happened in outside of the United States, and then in that case, of course, we can't call because there's not an agency that needs to be called. I mean, it happened outside of this country. And if the abuser is not in this country, right? Um, Another thing that I really, really wanted to stress in today's episode is that when it comes to immigration evaluations, the release of information. I know I already mentioned that, but I want to go back to it and talk a little bit more about it. Because when it comes to immigration evaluations, we might not be talking to the client. A lot of cases, like for example, a hardship case, cancellation of removal, N648, and I'd say those. A lot of cases, a lot of these clients won't be the immigrant, the applicant who's applying with immigration. So what you'll see is that the immigrant will call us and ask about information and ask about our services, but really they're not our client. Their spouse is the client, or their parent who needs to do a N648, or they're the immigrant of a spouse of a citizen in hardship cases. So we got to be really, really careful with that, because again, that's why it takes a lot of expertise and experience and really knowing how to filter who your client truly is, because sometimes you'll schedule the appointment, you'll speak the whole entire time to the wrong person, and when it comes to the appointment time, maybe the wrong person shows up. That's happened to me actually. So in the beginning, so that's why when you're screening the calls, when you're speaking to the person before you set up the appointment, you always have to make sure and you ask the right questions to see who is your client. For two reasons, again, for HIPAA reasons. So again, the spouse, the son, the child, the adult child, whoever, they can call and ask information. But once their parent or once their spouse becomes our client, they're our client. And we have to make sure that we have a release of information in order to be able to speak to the family member. And also to confirm sessions. We confirm sessions with the client, or unless we have a release of information, we speak to other people. Another release of information that you need is the release to speak to the attorney. So a lot of these cases, immigration cases, you'll be in communication with the immigration attorney or the paralegal or the immigration attorney's office staff. So we need release of information forms signed by the client for all those people. Otherwise, we can't. And specifically when it comes to domestic violence cases, VAWA, you really, really need to make sure that you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, because when it comes to domestic violence, you are dealing with an abuser who might still be stalking or pursuing the victim. And, a lot of these VAWA clients, they are applying for VAWA without their husband, their spouse, knowing that they're doing that. So there's a lot of confidentiality, care, attention, and caution that should be used with these clients. Because, for example, what if the abuser finds that the client's coming to you? I've had that happen actually, where they called on the client's behalf. And you have to be very, very careful, because this is a very vulnerable population. And for example, if an abuser calls and asks, I'm calling because my wife asked me to call and set up an appointment. When is her appointment? She forgot the date. I'm just calling to confirm her session. So for example, HIPAA absolutely should be enforced, because, you know, if you don't have a release for this person, you can't even confirm that you know the person that they're calling about. And, you know, that's why we have to be very careful, which is why I wanted to make sure I talk today about that, about HIPAA compliance, about our ethics, and about ensuring that just because we're dealing with immigration evaluations, we're still, you know, all the ethics, all the forms, all the consent, all the cares that a regular therapy client would entail, immigration clients also, you know, need to abide by those. Okay. So I hope this episode helps, and you can find us online. You can find more information on our social media platform, which I know by heart now. Well, I have to check actually, but it's immigration on Instagram. You can find us at immigration_evaluations_center. I'll see you on the next one.